Hi there. I'm happy to present academic neurosurgeon Dr. Eben Alexander, whose career includes decades as a physician and associate professor at Harvard Medical School and revered teaching hospitals, was once staunchly committed to the materialistic worldview, the belief that the physical world was all that exists. His scientific belief system was shattered and quite altered by his 2008 transcendental near-death experience, or NDE, an odyssey into another realm during a week-long coma. His 3 books, available in more than 40 countries, are Proof of Heaven, The Map of Heaven, Living in a Mindful Universe. Dr. Alexander has been featured on more than 400 media interviews, including but not limited to Good Morning America, 2020, Oprah's Super Soul Sunday, the Discovery Channel, the Biography Channel, and numerous international radio, digital publications, and podcasts, including Grow Your Light with Deborah Zakaw. I'm very excited. So without further ado, Dr. Eben Alexander. And here he is in the flesh. I promised you, Dr. Eben Alexander. And he's got a story to tell. So buckle up. And doctor, just make sure you tell us everything, leave nothing out.
Okay, Deborah. Well, thanks so much for having me on today. It's a great pleasure to be here. I think it's important to point out, who I was before all this happened. I'd spent 54 years of my life honing a very conventional scientific worldview. I had trained at Duke. I taught at Harvard Medical School, taught neurosurgery. I've been doing that for about 15 years and also taught at other institutions. I thought I had a good idea of brain, mind, consciousness, and the nature of reality. And that's why, what I went through in November 2008 showed me I wasn't even remotely in the ballpark of a deeper understanding of the nature of reality, and that this universe is far grander than I'd ever appreciated before. On November 10th of 2008, woke up with severe back pain, 4:30 in the morning. Thought if I made my way down to a hot bathtub, maybe I could feel better. Almost couldn't get back out of that bathtub, and then struggled baby steps back, collapsing, writhing in agony on my bed. And soon thereafter, my youngest son, Bond, who was 10 years old at the time, came in the room and realized Dad is just in horrible shape. He started rubbing my temples, and as soon as he did that, I felt like he had driven a white hot spike through my head. Tremendous pain. I cannot describe the pain in my back, my head. And soon thereafter, grand mal seizures, and I was gone from this world. There's a myth out there perpetuated by, shoddy journalists who pretend that my coma was medication induced. Couldn't be further from the truth. And Wikipedia just perpetuates that and many other errors about my career and my history and my story. This was a meningitis-induced coma. That's why the scientific community takes my story so very seriously. And there's a medical case report that was written by 3 doctors not involved in my care, but fascinated by my miraculous healing, that appeared in the peer-reviewed Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases in September 2018. That medical case report is very critical because it goes far beyond all the evidence I presented in the book Proof of Heaven, showing, how my brain was in horrible shape, could not have had a dream or hallucination. And yet I had this profound experience that I'm about to describe. Now, the doctors who wrote up that case report were challenged by the peer review editors. They said, this case is unprecedented. Nobody's ever been this sick from bacterial meningitis and then ended up having a full recovery. How do you explain it? And they explained it by saying he had a near-death experience. And the peer review editors of the scientific journal also knew of these near-death experiences, like Anita Morjani, Mary C. Neal, who recovered from lymphoma, who recovered from over 30-minute warm water drowning, respectively. And so their cases and mine are beautiful examples of healing that goes far, far beyond anything we can expect in Western medicine. That's why the world should pay attention. And that is because it really indicates our kind of spiritual power of healing in our lives. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But it's very important to get that as these doctors demonstrated, my brain could not have had a dream or hallucination. That's why the case is so valuable. How come I had this extraordinarily rich spiritual experience when my brain was demonstrably offline? And therein lies the beautiful mystery and the beauty of the science of my case. And for people who don't understand medical science, they're lost. They can't really get where this is all going. But the more you understand about the medical science in that case report, the more you realize this extraordinary healing is part of our spiritual power to bring ourselves into healing and wholeness. Now, an important feature of my NDE, and it's very unusual. In fact, I don't really know of any other cases of NDEs where this was so prominent, was amnesia. I had no memories of Eben Alexander's life. I had no language, no knowledge of Earth, this universe. Where it all started for me in what I call the earthworm's eye view was a very primitive, coarse, kind of unresponsive subterranean realm. In that earthworm eye view, it was dark and foreboding, when I describe it. But to me at the time, given my amnesia and no knowledge of any other possibility, I just accepted it. This is the way existence is. And I'm sure it seemed to go on for a very long time because I didn't have any memory of moment to moment. But luckily, I was rescued by a slowly spinning white light that came out of the murky darkness. And this slowly spinning light came packaged with a perfect musical melody. And music, of course, became a gigantic theme for my journey because that melody was something that I could recall the musical notes of later on in the journey and reconjure up this beautiful portal that led me up out of that ugly earthworm eye view realm into the rich, ultra-real Gateway Valley. That had many Earth-like features. I was a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing. There were millions of other butterflies looping and spiraling in vast formations. I never at any point in the entire experience had any body image of me. Never saw kind of myself as a body or having body parts. And I was just this speck of awareness. And I remember from that butterfly wing witnessing this beautiful meadow down below surrounded by this rich forest, every bit of it verdant, fertile, no signs of any death or decay. There were sparkling waterfalls and the crystal blue pools. And I remember seeing thousands of beings dancing down in this meadow. When I wrote it all up many weeks later, in my language, of course, it all returned to me, I said those were souls between lives. But during this entire journey, there was never anything that came to me as words. It was always pure conceptual flow. One of the great realizations on that butterfly wing was this sense of a soft summer breeze that blew through. And that breeze was my first awareness of the infinitely loving, powerful, and absolutely one with me kind of spiritual nature of that God force, that beautiful creative force of love that binds us all together. And I first witnessed that as this breeze that I later called the breath of God or the divine wind. And that breeze was my reminder or my first knowledge of knowing the power and beauty of that God force. And so in that situation on that butterfly wing, the good news is I wasn't alone. There was a beautiful young woman, sparkling blue eyes, high cheekbones, high forehead, broad smile. And she looked at me. She was dressed in the same kind of simple garb as all of those people dancing down below, the souls between lives. Yet it was very colorful. Colors beyond the rainbow, just like these butterflies. I mean, the way of knowing there is so different from knowing here. And even something like time flow is very different. So, for example, people often in this kind of setting would be describing a life review, their life flashing before their eyes. Now, given my amnesia, I could not have an Eben Alexander life review, but I witnessed life reviews in very powerful fashion, as I will get to in just a moment. But in that kind of a beautiful setting with this lovely woman on the butterfly wing beside me. And those who've read the book, Proof of Heaven, will realize it was my discovery of her identity 4 months after my coma that was so crucial in my accepting the reality of the journey and diving into a deeper exploration of it. But I think the message she had to me was probably the fundamental message I was to bring back to this world. And that message was delivered telepathically. She never had to say a word. The beauty of her look at me, this look of pure love, came associated with this message. You are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You are deeply cared for. And you can do no wrong. I wish I had explained that last statement a little better in Proof of Heaven, because some people get to that point in the book and they think, what do you mean? We can do anything we want? Of course not. But the do no wrong, what that means is, in the light of the love of that realm, of that God force, you realize that all your life review items, the things you've done, if you've been selfish and greedy, given up pain and suffering to others, that looks especially horrible in your life review. And that's why the life reviews are nudging us towards love, towards compassion, towards kindness, and loving ourselves. And many of us in this material world, we don't even love ourselves enough. We've kind of forgotten the divine spiritual beings that we are, that we're here to help others and serve the higher good. And all of that becomes apparent in these journeys. So that's the deepest lesson we get in these life reviews. And if you've been busy handing out pain and suffering, it will come back at you. So it teaches us the golden rule in many ways is written into the fabric of the universe. Treat others as you would like to be treated. And that false sense of separation that comes from materialism is defied by this beautiful sense of oneness and of shared purpose and meaning, and that it's all about unconditional love. This is what religions have tried to teach us for thousands of years, but ultimately the near-death experience community very strongly supports this notion of oneness and love, compassion, and NDEs going back thousands of years support all of this deep message. And so for me on that butterfly wing, what happened then, I remember witnessing all this joy and merriment going on down below, all those souls between lives, dancing, children playing, dogs jumping, incredible festivities, all being fueled because up above were these swooping orbs of pure angelic choirs. They have appeared to me to be kind of oval beings, each one of pure kind of spiritual angelic form, and they were swooping in these vast formations up above, leaving leaving this golden trail against this blue-black velvety sky that was lit with clouds of pure color. I mean, I cannot put into words the beauty and the majesty and the awesome nature of this. And it turns out that those angelic choirs that were swooping above were emanating chants and anthems, hymns that would just thunder through my awareness and reminded me that this was spiritual home. The words that we use to describe all this might sound foreign to some people, and yet there were thousands of people who contacted me after reading the book Proof of Heaven, because those words, strange as they might sound, awakened in them a memory of something their own soul had been through. And that's, I think, one reason the book was such an extraordinary kind of bestseller on the New York Times list. It did far better than any NDE book ever had because of that deep resonance, I think, with people who had had similar journeys. Now, for me, what happened next was an incredible vision as I saw that those angelic choirs above were generating yet another musical portal, yet another light portal from that gateway valley up somewhere else. And it turns out that I remember seeing all of four-dimensional space-time and our lowest material world collapsing down. All of that rich spiritual realm of that gateway valley with all of its beauty and majesty, the places we would reunite with higher soul, with soul groups, go through our life reviews, plan next incarnations, and then dive back in. All of that was shown to me in this beautiful gateway valley. And yet now I saw all of that collapsing down, including my notion of deep time or meta time. It's important to remind people, one of the reasons these journeys are ineffable or hard to explain is because all of time opens up to us. I mean, imagine a life review occurring to you where birth, death, everything in between, even before, lifetimes before and after, all of that is available to you at once, not in the normal narrative of living a life as we do here in this material world, but that incredible sense of visualizing these incredible aspects across time and space. You start to appreciate linkages, information, incredible kind of lessons that are not apparent when we're kind of living the narrative. And so this was an extraordinary kind of gift to me to witness all of that. And yet I got to see all of that collapsing down. And that's when I was ascending through this light portal that was provided by those angelic wires. And that led me into what I call the core. The core was an infinite inky blackness, filled to overflowing with love, with the infinite loving power of that divine God force. And it's important to point out that more than 90% of people who report having a near-death experience going back thousands of years across all cultures, and all belief systems, including many who are formerly atheistic or agnostic, more than 90% of people who have this kind of experience come back knowing the reality of that infinitely loving God force, not just believing it, knowing it from experience. And that is why it's so important for all of us to get on board with this. And as we can discuss later, I will tell you how in workshops that Karen and I, my partner, Karen Newell, also the co-author of the book, Living the Mindful Universe, the third and most important book of the three that I've written on this topic, we often do workshops in meditation. And meditation is also a way to get this kind of deep knowledge. So you don't have to have an NDE to get it. But meditation, centering prayer, the many different ways we can go into that mental realm and find out that it's actually the mind of the universe that we're getting into. That's the important thing to get from all of this. Now, in that core realm, every time I entered there, because I entered multiple times, I was told, you're not here to stay. We'll teach you many things. You'll be going back. Again, pure conceptual flow, not in those words. Those are the words I used weeks later when I was writing it all up. But in that one of those passes through the core realm, I saw what I call the flying fish vision, which showed me that we as material beings down here, we programmed forgetting is a huge part of it. We don't know the knowledge of our higher soul from between lives. All of that gets deleted for various reasons, to give us skin in the game, some buy-in to this existence so we can learn and teach these lessons, have some passion about our life. But then you come to realize that it's not the only existence we have, that we are spiritual beings and that we return to those spiritual realms. But this is where we get the work done, down here in these material realms. There came a time when, as they promised me, you're not here to stay in the core, that I could no longer conjure up, using those musical notes in their memory, the pathway from the earth where my view into the Gateway Valley. To say I was sad at that point would be a vast understatement, but I also knew at that point that I could trust that I would be taken care of. And that's one thing that I hope to give all of my fellow beings. It's that sense of trust in the love and the power and the majesty of this realm and how it's there to help us. And it's something that we can access even in these lifetimes, as I said, through meditation, centering prayer, other modes of going within. And so after I found that I could no longer conjure up that light portal up to higher levels in the spiritual realm, I recognized that there were thousands of beings going off around me, off into the darkness, many with heads bowed, some holding candles. There was this murmuring energy coming from them. And I didn't understand any of the language of the murmuring, but it was very comforting. And the thing that was so surprising to me was it brought me the very same comfort and sense of being in my spiritual home that I'd first encountered in the Gateway Valley and then in the core. But now I was getting that from all these beings that were attracting me back to something. I knew not what. And then the very last thing I saw deep in this coma experience were the 6 faces that would bubble up out of the muck. I remember them today as if the whole thing happened yesterday. And it was interesting, at the time they happened, my amnesia was still very active. And so at the time that it happened, in that amnesic state, I didn't recognize them. And they would say a few words and I couldn't recognize the words because the amnesia still involved our earthly language. But the thing is, I was getting a very comforting sense from them. That's the important part of the message. And it turns out that 5 of those 6 were very important because they were people, close family and friends, who were in the ICU room the last 24 hours I was in coma, or the last 48 hours. Many people who were present physically in the ICU room deep in my coma on those earlier days, before day 4, I have no memory of whatsoever. So this helped me to figure that the vast majority of the coma experience had to happen before days 4 or 5 in my 7-day coma, and not at the very end as I was starting to emerge from the coma from a medical sense. That was a very important thing to get. And it turns out that one of those faces, I must mention, was not physically present. It was a face of a family friend named Susan Renchis. I first met her in freshman English class at UNC Chapel Hill in 1972, where we became friends. But then we kind of parted our ways later on in college. But then she became a very close friend of my former spouse, teaching at a school in Raleigh, North Carolina. And the two of them become very good friends with a third friend who was also present during my coma. And all of that close friendship was important because my former spouse and the other friend present knew that Susan had helped people in deep coma. She had done what's called channeling. Now, if you asked me about channeling before my coma as this Harvard neurosurgeon, I would have told you there's no such thing. It's nonsense. I got a firsthand lesson of how real channeling is because Susan, they appealed to her that I was in deep coma, very ill with this meningitis. And so Susan, on nights 4 and 5 of my coma, she would go into a channeling trance down in her home in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And she was as clear to me as anyone else. The others that were physically present in the ICU room, and there was Susan. So when I came out of it all, and in the next day or so, and I was asking, well, is this person, that person? Well, they were all there. Well, where's Susan? Well, she wasn't physically here, but she channeled to you. And I said, of course. In that realm, I knew that distance is no object. Physical distance doesn't matter in the spiritual realm. So it made perfect sense that Susan had been there present to me to help guide me back to this world. Now, it turns out that the last face of those faces was the most important. That was a 10-year-old boy. And I didn't recognize him at the time, not with my eyes and ears, although his presence and his messaging to me was very important. Turns out that was my son, Bond. 10 years old. They had protected Bond from the worst news during that week. But at this point, day 7 of coma, it was a Sunday morning. Doctors had a family conference where they discussed with my family. I'd gone from a 10% chance of survival down to 2% with no chance of recovery. And when Bond overheard that, he knew things were much worse than he'd been told. He came running down the hallway, pulled open my eyelids, one eye looking over there, one eye over there, neither pupil working. Those of you in medicine know that's a horrible picture. And I promise you, I didn't see him with the eyes or hear him with my ears, but somehow his message got through to me. And he was pleading with me, Daddy, you're going to be okay. Daddy, you're going to be okay. And just this tearful plea for me. And now most of this journey, because of my amnesia, I thought all these lessons I can get, this can cease, continue, doesn't matter. But now everything mattered. Because that pleading with me, I realized there was another soul out there. I was very important to that soul. And somehow I had to find my way back to him. And that was the first thing that in this whole journey made me very afraid, because I knew something important had to happen. And I had no idea how to make it happen. And somehow my higher soul was able to muster my way back here. And I started waking up on the ICU bed. My amnesia still in effect, though. Because as I was waking up, fighting the ventilator, they pulled out the breathing tube, and I said, thank you. I still did not remember the loved ones at the bedside, my mother, my sisters, my sons. I had no idea who they were. All I knew was this incredible journey that I'd just been through that seemed to go for months or years, but had to happen in 7 Earth days of my coma. And memories started coming back rapidly. My language came back very rapidly, literally over hours. And within a few days, I'm starting to have family memories of these people who were there in the ICU with me. I was put into the step-down unit and really started to recover tremendously. And in fact, over 2 months, I had a full return of memories. As I discuss in the book, Living in a Mindful Universe, those memories in many ways were more complete than they had been before coma. This is one of the gigantic messages of my journey and similar journeys, that memories are not even stored in the brain. Neurosurgeons have suspected that for a very long time because no brain resection has ever been associated with loss of long-term memories. And I've spent the 15 years since my coma working with scientists around the world, trying to come to a deeper understanding of brain, mind, and consciousness, and ultimately showing that in a deep scientific sense, when you unite quantum physics, neuroscience, philosophy of mind, non-local consciousness, and parapsychology, etc., when you put all of this information together with near-death experiences, shared death experiences, which are just like near-death but happen in perfectly healthy people, after-death communications, which happen in more than half our population, and the hospice community, where the dying experience mirrors exactly what happens in NDEs, you start to realize this is all informing us about the true nature of human existence. And the evidence for things like reincarnation are absolutely overwhelming, but don't worry, love is such a dominant theme there that your loved one will never reincarnate before they are there for you in the important function of welcoming you to the afterlife and helping you to go through your life review and learn those deep lessons. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of my story. And I'm happy to try and answer any comments or questions you might have.
Now I'm going to make it so people can actually see us. So, oh, and there's your book. Good.
Yeah, perfect.
So one of the things that impressed me is that you said that your Susan was praying you home or channeling you home. At every step of your story, I recognize that whatever step, you were never alone. There was someone calling you at every, so the butterfly wing, we had your guide, and then the angelic choirs sung you to the upper octaves, and then coming home, there were people around you giving you love. So at any moment, but your son running in and say, the same thing happened with Stephen Weber, where someone living was always in his peripheral vision. And he even asked one of his guides, who's that over there praying? She says, that's okay, she can be here. It was literally an out-of-body thing. So, and they ended up marrying happily ever after.
Well, I think the ultimate lesson from NDEs is really that love is our great, that's what brings us into wholeness and healing. The more we can live that life, recover that sense of love. In fact, I came back realizing that, it's not that we don't love our enemy enough or love our neighbors enough. It's that we don't even love ourselves enough as the divine sacred beings we are. So, and we can use meditation and centering prayer to get to that kind of core of love. Given these stories are very important to help people understand the deeper, more profound nature, even if they haven't had it in their personal experience. And yet, you can cultivate through personal experience of centering prayer, of deep meditation. And for me, I will confess, I have a tool that's extremely powerful for meditation, Sacred Acoustics. Go to sacredacoustics.com. You can learn a lot more.
So you don't have to go very far to find out all this information, because it's in the show notes along with links.
And also, I'll point out that there's a free workbook that goes with Living in a Mindful Universe. You can get to that workbook. It's an online 33-day email drip campaign at ebenalexander.com. When you get to that website, you'll see 33-day journey right there on the welcome page. You sign up, leave your first name, leave email address, and for 33 days, you'll get an email each day of a major concept out of the book, Living in a Mindful Universe. Wow. Plus, the best thing is more than 12,000 people have now taken that course since the book came out, and they leave their comments and they help each other. There's a whole community that's grown up on that 33-day journey. So I strongly encourage people to take that journey. It's completely free. It's meant to give you a lot of the same lessons that you get out of Living in a Mindful Universe, but we realize a lot of people don't necessarily have the money to buy a book. So this is our way of helping them get the deep and beautiful truth and start experiencing this on their own. That 33-day journey at ebenalexander.com.
And that is also in the show notes. So you don't have to search far for all that. So generous, so generous. I wanted to mention, switch gears here a little bit about the angelic choirs. Yours was the first book, Proof of Heaven was the first book that I read that actually described it so well, because I had angelic choirs experiences. I didn't have a near-death experience, and they would be at random. I wouldn't get any prophetic visions, and they'd come and go. I believe I was blessed with that, so my life would come down this road instead of another road. But
now, are you a musician?
No, I
Okay,
I
fascinating.
wasn't anything like that. It would just come upon me, and what it would do is be the music would be everywhere around me. So if I turned my head or up and down, it would be the same. It came off as one instrument, but I heard every instrument played, and it would
Mhm.
come off as one voice, but I could tease out individual voices. It was a miracle, just a miracle, and it stuck with me my whole life. I get excited about it, and if I think if if people could just get one moment of that music, that could be something they could hold on to and be interested in. And some of the choirs I've heard on earth come close. They're
Right.
not the whole of it. I mean, very talented people. So thank you for I had studied Raymond Moody and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. They didn't have near death experiences, but they
Right.
monitored them, wrote about them. And yours was that changed my life. I tell you,
Well, so glad to
you were
hear
my
that. I
hero.
think you were tapping into the ultimate source of that idealized form of music that many composers have access to, and musicians.
Yeah.
I think that's where they get their best stuff. But they
Uh-huh.
need to learn, just as Edison, the great inventor from GE, and
Mhm.
Albert Einstein, Salvador Dali, many artists, scientists, philosophers have developed techniques of getting into this hypnagogic space. And
Right.
that's where they start to meld with that beautiful kind of infinite world of the spiritual. And that's where they glean some of their best stuff and bring it back.
Right.
But I would caution that from my perspective, the music that I heard in the Gateway Valley, those beautiful angelic choirs, in many ways is a music that's too perfect, too
Yeah.
ideal to ever
I know.
be brought back fully into this
Yeah.
realm.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so perfect. It's amazing. It's just amazing. And another thing I noticed, just as a side note, is that whenever I heard it, it was always in praise of the higher octaves, the upper realms. It was always in praise, and sometimes when you go to church, you sing songs that just berate the human race and give fear that something bad's going to happen to you unless you do this. Yeah, there's a lot of songs like that. Um, that, but none of that is in heaven
Well,
when
none of
it's
that is
all.
part of this spirituality of near death experiences. It's completely about love and kindness, compassion, mercy, acceptance, when necessary, forgiveness. I mean, the greatest ingredients for a harmonious and peaceful world are right there in the teachings of near death experiences and of the science of consciousness that proves the reality of these stories.
Right. Oh, that's wonderfully put. Um, I have a question for you, and that is, so you had no belief in the afterlife. It wasn't a fascination of yours. It wasn't something you traveled or sought out. And so you experienced like the dark earthworm place. And there's some people who come back from near death saying, "Oh, I was in hell for a while." But I followed Howard Storm's story. And he wrote a book, My Descent into Death, A Second Chance of Life. And according to an interview on Unsolved Mysteries in 1997, I've listened to him on other stations and stuff. He reported that prior to his near death experience, he was an atheist and, in fact, so aggressive, his wife and children were afraid of him. So, and you weren't that way, but you didn't believe in the afterlife, and then you went into it. So what happened with Howard is that he was what he called stuck in the hell realm. um, you started your angelic or your journey subterranean, the earthworm view. Do you believe, just off the top of your head, you might not have thought of this, the that your first experience crossing over will have to match your belief of what it is, because that's our promise, is that it's seamless. Right. There's many mansions in heaven type of thing. So Eben Alexander passed away, and now he's going to, that energy of what he thought the afterlife is matched him. And same with Howard. He was an atheist and it just didn't have anything, which is fine. Everybody can have that. You're going to be cared for no matter what. You can't get out of love when you love.
Right.
You just
Well,
can't get
I
away
would
from it.
say, it's important to point out most near-death experiences are quite pleasant and
I
positively
know.
transformative.
Yes.
In the literature, maybe 3 to 5% are hellish or distressing. I would say certainly if you've been busy handing out a lot of pain and suffering to other people, you're probably more likely to have a hellish NDE, if for no other reason than your life review, where you have to be on the receiving end of what you've dished
Yes.
out to people for your life, is not
Mhm.
fun. That's why the life review is so important. And as Bruce Grayson of MD, who has studied these as a skeptical scientist for more than 45 years, will tell you, he published a paper in the fall of 2021 discussing the life review. And he said that the majority of people, it's a reliving of events, not just a remembering. And not only that, it's from the perspective of others around them who were affected by their thoughts and actions. So
Right.
your life review isn't experienced from your perspective. It's experienced from others around you. Shows how we're sharing the dream of the one mind. But that's why if you're busy handing out pain and suffering to others, don't expect, to have this pleasant, wonderful little situation there. But what happens is it's transformative. And this is also borne out in the hospice literature. There's a beautiful book by Christopher Kerr of Hospice Buffalo, totally hospice. He doesn't care about NDEs one bit, but he cares a lot about what happens when people actually die. And you find exactly the same things happen. They reunite with souls of departed loved ones.
Mhm.
They make amends for where they've hurt other people during their lifetime. You find that love is it. And you don't go into those experiences being an ally with hatred and pain and suffering and saying, yeah, you get credit for that. Hell no, not even remotely. That will give you a hellish NDE. That's why it's important for all of us to live sharing love, kindness, compassion, mercy with all of our fellow beings. Now, getting back to kind of my personal story, I wanted to believe in a God and afterlife because my dad had been so influential in my life, as I said earlier. But through much of my neurosurgical career, no, I couldn't see how conscious awareness could survive death of the brain and body. And then I had it's something I discuss in the book, Proof of Heaven. It was a dark night of the soul that began with a perceived rejection from my birth mother. A huge part of my story is the adoption abandonment wound. I was put up for adoption at age 11 days. I won't go into more of that now. A lot of that's in Proof of Heaven. But the important thing is in the year 2000, my older son, Eben IV, who was doing a school project in family genealogy, said, Dad, you have to reach out to the children's home again. We need more information. And so I wrote another letter to the children's home. I had not done that in decades, saying, is my birth mother out there? I didn't think that there was any birth father still available to me, but a birth mother I thought I could find. And I tell that story in Proof of Heaven, but what I found out about 2 weeks after initiating that process with the social workers at the children's home is I called them and found out that my birth parents had gotten married. Not only that, they had 3 kids, but that the youngest daughter had died 2 years earlier in 1998. So it was not a good time to come back in their lives. And if you read the adoption literature, you'll realize that if an adult adoptee gets another rejection from the birth mother, in addition to being rejected when they were put up for adoption, it'll tip them over. And my life tipped over big time in 2000 in terms of marital issues, in terms of work issues, et cetera, et cetera. I won't go into detail, but I went to a dark night of the soul where I gave up on any faith in a loving personal God or power of prayer. I stopped saying prayers at night with my kids. I stopped taking them to church. And that was my life. And then a year before coma, of walking on a beach in South Carolina, 2 of my 3 adoptive sisters said, don't you think it's time you reached out to your birth family again? My first thought was no, because I recognized how much it had thrown me over the cliff back in the year 2000. But they were right. They could tell there was something missing in my life. I wrote another letter to the children's home, and that's when I got the positive answer. And there's a giant story behind all of that, too, that has to do with my career in vascular neurosurgery, which in many ways was heralded by a biological predisposition to aneurysms in my family. And that's what kept the birth family, one sister in particular, sending messages to the children's home that allowed me to connect with them. I mean, there's a huge amount to that story, synchronicity extraordinaire, but we don't have time to go into all that.
That's amazing. That is so amazing. So happy you spent time with me today. This is so exciting.
Well, my pleasure. I think the important lesson of those hellish NDEs is just they are also positively transformative. Just like Howard Storm came back a much better person. Same thing with Daniel Brinkley and his NDE. I mean, he'd been in Vietnam.
Oh, that's right.
Really bad stuff to people. But in his NDE, he saw it all and he made amends. It teaches us, NDEs and life reviews teach us, be kind to one another. Don't mistreat each other. And ultimately, it's about more than just humans. It's about all of our animal friends, etc. We really need to be better stewards for this planet. Ultimately, that's what NDEs teach us. So ultimately, I'm very optimistic about the future of mankind because I see the power of NDEs to transform our entire society and get rid of this horrific, toxic, narcissistic egocentrism that's destroying all of us and start replacing it with a much more compassionate, kind, and harmonious approach to living our lives that brings us individually far better peace. And also brings the world at large far better peace and harmony.
Well, you are really the motor behind that, because again, a lot of us have not experienced it personally. And of course, when you experience it personally, like my choir experience, then it's easier to step on that train and keep it as your signpost to be a better person. But you have done such a wonderful job. And
encourage people to use those tools like sacredacoustics.com. And the other resource I would mention is innersanctumcenter.com, INNER sanctumcenter.com. If you visit it, you'll see what I mean. But it's a bunch of different opportunities that Karen and I have put out there. A whole set of interviews we did with thought leaders around the world during the pandemic, thought leaders on consciousness, other experiencers. There's a mental health practitioner course there about spiritual healing. And there's also opportunities to work with us on a monthly basis. We have a group who like to meet up with us, and that's all available at innersanctumcenter.com.
I do have that. Your assistant, Elizabeth, what a beautiful woman she is. She gave me all of those links so I wouldn't have to search it out to make sure, write it down to make sure I've spelled it correctly.
Right.
So all of the links.
Would say anybody who doesn't believe in angels has not yet met Elizabeth. So
yes, I know. She is
We're very blessed to have her. She's great.
She is. She's wonderful to talk to. She's generous. She's so busy, but she makes time. God bless her. This is great. Totally. I want to respect your time, and I do respect your mission and admire you. And I'm so grateful you came on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's been great talking with you.